Hello, African world. Welcome to the Cosmic Cowrie Shellcast, where we discuss sci-fi, fantasy, and other genre tropes from a revolutionary Pan-African socialist perspective. I'm Phil Jr., and I'm joined by Sasha
Hello.
and Roma.
Hello.
Tonight is episode 4, Post-Apocalyptica, where we discuss post-apocalyptic stories on film, television, novels, etc., and the concept of the apocalypse itself. And so, folks, let's start with what have you been up to? What's going on? We've got an election day in America today. We've got a lot going on. Before we get into the topic, we'll chop it up, check in with each other. Well, let's start with the New York. Who you like? You think Mom Donnie's going to pull it out?
I was actually wondering when the results were going to come out. I thought it would be right after. I was going to just look them up. I think he will pull out. I think he will win. I just think he's going to be heavily watched. Trump has already said that he's going to be keeping an eye on him on the federal level, which is not something that's usually heard. I think he's been threatening this to any leader. So as much as I want Mondani to be the next socialist push in America, I think he's just going to be like Gavin Newsom, where he's going to try and say a lot, and through little to no fault of his own, it's just not going to be able to get done. It's such a right-leaning regime.
Yes, I'm not very I've heard a bit about Mom Donnie, but not like super updated on how the race and stuff is going. But I know that he's like socialist, right? Socialist Democrat.
Yeah. It would basically be the first socialist executive in a major city in a long time. Probably way back in the International Workers of the World era in the 20s and 30s. I think we had some socialist mayors. Yeah, it's been a while.
He's also been endorsed. I think Bernie endorsed him as a senator, which I think that's the last push he has for us. We tried with Bernie; it's not going to work out. I hope, and it's been a worldwide phenomenon. There's people in Europe who's watching the Mondani race. Mm-hmm. And I think more than anything, it really just speaks to, because the Democrats have been throughout this entire Republican kind of push and this kind of Republican, they've been seen as weak. The Democratic Party hasn't really seemed to stand for much. They're just the baseline of American politics, while the right will come, and every time they get a president in, they mess everything up. From Reagan to Bush to Trump, they either mess everything up or they fix it, depending on how you see things. So if you're white, it's a great win for you. But Democrats seem to just just get the country back to the status quo and then stop. And Mondani is the first evidence of somebody who's going to push past even the status quo, or supposedly. Since Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Especially the race in New York. So Curtis Sleva is the Republican runner in the race, and this is a guy who, anybody from the 90s, 80s, we might remember him. So there was a group called the Guardian Angels, which was a vigilante group that was really active in New York at the time. And it's kind of, you could draw comparisons now to groups like the Proud Boys and different things like that. It's the guy who basically started a street gang in the 80s that he claimed was the purpose was to protect New Yorkers from crime and all this stuff like that. And it's been really bizarre because he's the now almost reasonable Republican. Very, very bizarre. I think that's a hallmark of election day in America, is just a lot of weird politics and a lot of explosive stuff can happen. So and you've got a lot of people on the right who are saying that this will be like basically the end of New York if Mom Donnie wins, like the total destruction of New York. So
Heard the biggest fear is that, if you raise the taxes and if you do all these things, the millionaires and the billionaires will leave, and they would have to then build something of their own with their own culture. Like billionaires come to LA and New York to get a bit of culture that they are devoid of. They don't have any kind of these cultural connections. So if they were to go to where? Alabama? Like when's the last time you saw even Ted Cruz doesn't stay in Texas for more than 30 seconds and he's the governor. So I don't think that raising some taxes would make New York necessarily lose their top earners or their top consumers in just a logical sense of just based on where these billionaires go. They want to be somewhere where they can enjoy their wealth. And you can only do that with cultures of people who you've stolen your wealth from.
that's the truth. Well, speaking of the end of things, so yeah, I definitely agree with you. I don't think we're gonna have the destruction of New York. I think it'll actually be really good for him. Yeah, like that kind of brings like this idea of what do people actually think is the end and how that changes. So it kind of leads into our topic. So tonight's episode, we are focusing on the apocalypse and apocalyptic stories, and specifically post-apocalypse. And so, like, we'll talk about the definition. Yeah, I guess some parameters. Usually, the apocalypse, we are talking about a total collapse. So not like a post-war environment, not like Japan in the 1950s or some places around the world now in the Middle East where they are in post-war environments. Yet this is not just one country has a major disaster like this. We're talking about total environmental climate just shutdowns, global nuclear holocaust.
I think the easiest way to describe it is a complete decay of any previous systems of power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be a post-apocalyptic, but Russia's still standing. You might have some Russian people who are trying to bring it back, but it requires destruction of the system, and then some loyalists who will try to bring back some form of said system. We know the big names of post-apocalyptic. It's most zombie movies, World War Z, Last of Us, where the world has collapsed due to just a spread of a virus. I don't remember what caused the apocalypse in Mad Max.
Yeah.
I think it's
kind of like it's basically nuclear holocaust, like nuclear war, and what started it was kind of like a climate disaster and like an economic disaster that led into countries just throwing nuclear bombs. Like one thing, the first movie, 1979, Mad Max, is right before the collapse. It's actually not quite a post-apocalyptic movie yet. It shows that there's still infrastructure. They're still trying to keep policing alive. So Mad Max himself is a police officer in the original movie, who we basically see him go out into the wasteland after his family is killed. So then the next movie, that's after the nuclear collapse, and you start to see roving bands of people, and just a total, like you said, Oroma, even the ideologies and political systems and all that stuff basically goes away.
Yeah, it usually seems like there's still the rubble or still the building structures that were in the previous world, but the consciousness or the way that people are living on it is what has dramatically changed. Usually in the movies it's as if there's no law or anything anymore, and we see gangs form, and people just taking power. So that's one similarity that I see run through them.
Yeah. And well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that brings up a question of does that have to happen? Because like I've thought for a while. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Mad Max series. Love Mad Max Fury Road. I think it's like one of the best movies we've had in the last like 10, 15 years. And it's extremely bleak, and it is extremely, there's a Western assumption about how chaotic and violent people are, like our interests are. Like, you know, even the way we respond to, or we talk about the response to disasters that people might have. We always say like, oh, in America, if we have a few different climate disasters, people are going to just every person for themselves, and people are rioting because they just have to get food, and you go and loot whoever. Usually in countries, like when there's like a major disaster, people are like pull together. Actually, they actually like cooperate, and they start working together. Even here, like in small town America, you know, some of the recent hurricanes, flooding we've had, it's been really interesting. Like in North Carolina, I believe, just to see like the amount of local community organizing to just like feed people, drive people places. Like people are using their own construction equipment to clear roads and stuff. So I think we have this Western kind of and like US assumption that people are just going to like descend into, I use this word specifically, savagery, and that, you know, that's who people really are, when I don't know if that's really the case. What do you think?
I think I agree. I don't think people are savage. I think it's a narrative being pushed, because if people aren't naturally savage, then you don't really, you know, you lose the purpose of a cop. And I think in like Mad Max and a lot of these apocalyptic worlds, kind of like how the special white girl is the hero of every dystopian movie. It's like the strong hand of a law long forgotten is always the hero of a Mad Max series or a post-apocalyptic. It's some army man or some cop who remembers what it was like to have American law and structure that brings together the savagery. So you need to say that, oh, without our structure, without our system, this is why you need our system. Our system isn't just here for fun. You need it because without it, you just eat each other. And that's like the first thing. Like I think that's the idea that most post-apocalyptic movies kind of push. At least the older ones. I do think that now the question is, are people gun-ho to keep a society that didn't work? Like it's more left. Post-apocalyptic movies are more leftist kind of socialist ideas. But before, I think it was just like a cop across the desert bringing together humanity.
That is the very Trumpian figure who's like the villain of Fury Road. It reminded me of that when you mentioned that, Roma, of kind of like people looking to this kind of like military figure. He's this former like major that takes over this area in the wasteland, and he's got this like stark like white blonde hair. Yeah, it was funny. After that came out, it was pretty hard for me to like watch it like again, because I was a huge fan of it, and then I was like, God, I just like reminded me so much of Trump.
Yeah, there's like the theme of like decay and stuff too. That makes me wonder about zombie movies. Like there's always like a virus or something, as if it's like without these normal structures, everyone is just gonna like decay into like rotting flesh or like man-eating beasts. So it is interesting the stake that like the culture has in the status quo.
I also think that like zombie movies, I think it's the most common for sure, and I think that's because we don't want to believe that the apocalypse would be something that sounds reasonable. And I think this can go into one of our later questions. But if you make too many movies about, hey, the apocalypse is going to be climate change, it's like, damn, so maybe that moment where somebody's like, why didn't we change? Maybe now is the moment to change. So 9 times out of 10, the apocalypse comes from something that is so fantastical that it can never happen in our world. like zombies came because of genetic engineering, which we'll see when that becomes real or not. But that's usually one of the catalysts. In the movie Don't Look Up, it was a giant meteor, and while it was like, oh, we could have stopped it before it was too late, they didn't say like climate change. And maybe that's because and the whole movie was playing it safe, kind of one of those centrist, the right and the left are the same thing, so it doesn't matter who you choose kind of arguments. And Don't Look Up, where like it was a woman who acted like Trump, but it was made in 2016. She acted like Trump, but she looked like Hillary. It was a whole thing. But I do think that the idea of decay once the apocalypse comes is a big point, along with like the giddiness. I feel it's funny to look at how people react or how they would think, like, oh, if I was in an apocalyptic situation, what would I do? That kind of mindset.
There is some giddiness. Like, I can relate with that. Like, I'm wondering if like we can reflect on how we felt when we were first hearing about the pandemic, and like how it was nothing that has ever happened in my lifetime, and how about coronavirus, and like we didn't know how it spread or anything, like there was a lot of questioning. There was a lot of like people wondering if those who were speaking on it like had the authority, or if they had our best interests at heart. For me, that it felt like it was going to be the end of the world. I was like, oh, okay, everything's going to change after this. And just the like change to the regular day, it was kind of relieving, like to have like this space for me where I'm like more able to like slow down and stuff. I'm curious how y'all felt about it, because I definitely was like, this is the end of the world, like questioning what was going on.
I definitely remember thinking and feeling like this was gonna be a like fork in the road. Like I think, and in some ways it was. I think, unfortunately for our country, it basically meant a total change in our public health structure and all this stuff like that. Yeah, I remember like there was this point where nobody was working, and you started to hear like white progressives say stuff like, we should do a general strike. We should, we need like a socialist, like, basically revolution. We need to do, to fundamentally like change things. And because I think people were seeing how basically experiencing directly that the structure of the state wasn't taking care of folks, that our capitalist system basically like hit a wall of effectiveness during the pandemic, and people could see it just doesn't work that well. And I think there was a moment where I was like, this can really turn into like a huge, massive change where we get America to fall to the left. And then I remember very specifically, there were people I knew who were like white progressive folks, like men especially, that like they were bartenders, DoorDash, they own businesses where they work on like different things like city infrastructure. They started to push to go back to work, and I was like, oh, we lost it. Like people got too scared. They got too worried about what that huge change could be and what it might mean for their lives. And I think there's a sense of, for some of us, that it would be freeing, yet I think for a lot of people, the idea of the current system collapsing is just like terrifying. And I think it's something that, there's a lot of like American privilege. It's because of that,
I think that when COVID kind of came around, I never thought there was going to be the end of the world. I personally think that this system has fought like hell to stay, despite all of its flaws, and that there's very little that'll actually cause system collapse. Like I think that if the whole world started to get flooded, they try to put up domes and go from there. But I do remember that I also hoped, like sir, that it was going to be a complete political shift. And I was thinking that it was either going to completely split and polarize, which I guess it kind of did, where you had like either extreme right or extreme left. And it did that for a little bit with the mask, and masks became a big political point. Vaccines, everything became a big political point. But we came back to like status quo and normalcy and entropy. I think within like, as soon as we could go back to work, like Sir said, people were scared of losing their jobs, scared of what this actual change was, at least for the left, versus the right. In a weird way, kind of had their example. They're always just, let's just get back to the 50s, right? So they're never scared to enact these large sweeping changes. They're just like, we can just go to the 50s, it doesn't matter. Whereas we have to think of some crazy utopian society in order, at least in concept, in order to really have that equalization. But to kind of circle back to COVID and post-apocalyptic, there was a lot of people who did think it was the end of the world and were ready to kind of make their mark on this new world. Like, I'm going to have all the toilet paper, and then everybody's going to come to me for the toilet paper, and then I'm going to be the king of the world because it's no longer money. Or the world's currency is no longer assets and houses. It's whatever I can grab. It's my tools. It's a world where I'm on top, finally. Which I think is the biggest appeal of post-apocalyptic world or post-apocalyptic doomsday preppers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, talk about another thing that is, we have an American concept of it that I don't think would actually ever play out in reality. Like, so many people think that they're going to build a bunker in their home and shut out their neighbors and, you know, all like shelter under there and like with their families surrounded by AR-15s and like canned food. And like, most of them don't know how to can, so they're going to die of botulism. They don't know how to like ventilate their homes like underground, so that's also a risk of just like suffocation. And like, the lack of cooperation in a situation like that is what is really deadly. And I think that doomsday prepper kind of ideal of this home on the range, or like kind of like, you know, each American home is its own fortress in the suburbs trying to like ward off looters, like that's so unrealistic for how people would actually survive. Like, and I think that's a huge gap of understanding on the right, and something like, you know, they, like you said, they are giddy for, because I think they have these power fantasies and like these fantasies of kind of survival and being, like you said, in control.
And I think, you know, because the same thing comes, the same kind of feeling of giddiness comes at like with not tech bros, what are they? The other ones, finance bros. Whenever they get a recession coming on, which is another kind of capitalistic end of the world, like the 2008 recession, or when this AI bubble finally pops, there's always like that group of people who said all the prices are going to go down, and I'm going to be the one to know what to buy off bat. Like the guy who bought Amazon after the .com crash. And I think it all stems from it's weird because they understand that they can't get on top in a normal way. Like, they understand that in the system that they're in now, they will forever be stuck in the class they're assigned to, and they wait, whether it be wait for a nuclear winter, wait for Jesus to come and set fire to all of us again, or wait for climate change to take it out. I think they're all very strict. I think all doomsday preppers, weirdly enough, are very in tune with their class position. And they're just waiting for their chance to get on top through a complete reset. It's like, I don't know. I've always found it interesting. They have class consciousness, they just don't use it, or they do use it to their advantage, and it's just continuing the same predatory class system.
Basically, continuing colonialism.
Right. They just want it to be set. They get their turn.
Yeah, like I recall like people saying like, oh, this during the recession is when you get rich, when people get rich, and saying things like, if you don't have like a business running by the end of this, you wasted your time. I remember that type of stuff. Like, it could be like the rise and grind type like mindset. But yeah, like people wanting to buy things when their value is like lower. Like I'm interested too in this, like in talking more about the concept of like currency and stuff as the world ends, because I think another like anxiety that people have, you know, like when things are changing, you know, they go and buy the commodities up. But there's like some potential there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And also the giddiness that I feel is kind of like when something like that happens, it was kind of like when I was a kid, and like it would be, so I'm from Southern California, so I wouldn't have like snow days, but it would like be raining one day or something. Or one time like I went to school and there was a water main break on the school campus, so they said school is like, you don't, school is closed today, you can go home. Like it's that type of giddiness where like we're not following the same routine, and like there's just potential to like slow down and not always be like doing the same, like selling our time to the same like job or whatever we're going to daily, and like the same beat of things. Like to me, that is where a lot of potential for change lies. And like I don't know, like I guess maybe it would be interesting to see like how we can have more moments of that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like where things are actually able to move, and it's not just like trying to resist like a system that is not for us all the time.
Yeah, and I think like there's a real value in that. Like we should be like looking forward to this system ending, because it's so deadly to so many people, and it's you know, it's leading us towards like a complete ecocide, and I think there's that tension though between us looking forward to it and starting to imagine a world like after this. And I think one of the ways we do that is we have to really refine and keep refining like socialist and leftist thought, so that when things collapse, people have something better to draw on. They don't just say, let's do things exactly do the things exactly the same way. I think Parable of the Sower is a really good example of that. The main character in that story, her father is a Baptist preacher, yet he like also he does a lot of like mutual aid in the community. He's very like he believes in these like very like kind of leftist kind of style of politics, and like basically not just that, like running their community. And you know, the main character of Parable of the Sower goes on to like start a religion, a new religion, because everything's like kind of collapsing. Yet it's so much of it is based on this like collective mindset. And yeah, I think like there's so much promise of what the world could be after a system like this. I think part of the tension though is, and this is almost the next question, is like what do we say to people who are like accelerationists and believe that we have to accelerate this system to a collapse with this idea that that will then make it easier or more efficient to kind of build a new world?
So the accelerationists, I believe that there's two sides of this kind of coin, which is or not even two sides of the coin, but really the question of like, what do we take along with us? Because there is, I don't think a lot of people go for complete anarchy or want to completely have an anarchical state in the way that the masses understand anarchy. And we can go all into like what actual anarchy is and how that's just a removal of government, but even still, in terms of just every man for himself or going back to like an individualistic or even a tribal kind of system, I don't think anybody really is like fighting for that as much, or the masses aren't. So the question is for the masses, what do we want? Because the idea is that we will revert back to capitalism. Like that's the biggest lie capitalism ever told, is that it's our natural state. that we picked up rocks and shells and started assigning values to things and trading based off of that system. And a lot of post-apocalyptic movies are them trying to bastardize and remake a system that was good before this one slip up. So what do we think about that kind of idea that we naturally want the system, even though it's bad for us?
I think, yeah, it's a lie. Like, it's just indoctrination. Because we can remember before capitalism too. And, you know, if you're the type of person that needs evidence, there's evidence too, you know? Like, I also want to, yeah, if you have something, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's totally manufactured. I think that people were cooperative at scale longer than uncooperative. I think that when we look at so I'm gonna nerd out here. I've been playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3. Anybody in the chat, if you play Crusader CK3, let me know. So it's a grand strategy video game where you can take control of different nations and throughout the history of the world. So the new expansion pack, they talk about China and the basically how China was a world power way back in the 1100s and before. And this had this massive system of cooperation, of trade, of the Chinese folks had air conditioning back in the Middle Ages. They had advanced technology. They were many centuries deep into medicine and all these different things, infrastructure. And yes, there was serious warfare that happened in ancient China, and they never attacked the rest of the world. They didn't upend everything. They saw their power as the Silk Road, as their ability to coordinate cultures and things like that. Similar to the Ottoman Turks, that's another example of a world power in the past. Huge, massive people who they may not have been perfect, yet they weren't on this kind of hell-bent on conquest and dominating the entire planet. I mean, the Ottomans gave us the first system of religious tolerance we've had in a major state. So I think it's a myth that that the rulers of this place, this colony, have to keep going. They have to keep pushing that. Man, people are just going to descend into just total anarchy, like you mentioned, Romo, in the popular sense of what anarchy is, not the real one. And I think it's a lie. I think it's completely manufactured. So yeah, I think that's part of what I've always felt like people on the left need to really focus on is people want to take care of each other. Ultimately, I think that's actually the natural inclination that people have, is we're cooperative.
So if that's a natural inclination, do you think that natural inclination, all the years of being taught to be individualistic, will wash away with the system after the post-apocalyptic? I think that's my fear of a post-apocalyptic world, that even if people naturally want to help each other, the wanting and the romanticization of the previous society will be kind of the undoing of any kind of real progress from a destroyed section. We romanticize to this day. I think we've been romanticizing 2016 to 2020, Trump's reign. For some reason, his previous reign, or things were better, as he's making things worse. And so I think the nostalgia for a system that may not have been perfect, and it's always the may not have been perfect, but it was something.
Mm-hmm.
Versus this whole thing was just we have no idea where this is going to go. I think that fear will make people want to recreate it, if for no other reason, just to have some semblance of home security.
I think if there are not particular structures that uphold the ability to be very isolated and individualistic, then there will have to be another way that people go about things.
Yeah.
Remember, like I pointed out like the thing about how the structures, like in a post-apocalyptic movies, it's like the structure is still there. Like these old buildings, or like there's gonna be abandoned like malls or whatever, and like the zombies or whoever is like trying to survive still off of the structure. I see that like as like pointing to the importance too of like embodying and like making our ideology into material, like, and actually like building the structures that support the communal way of living, and like make it where it's easier to do communal and socialism and harder to be individualistic and like selfish or hoarding. So I'm curious to think more about like how we can transform the material like that we produce, you know, to support that changeover.
Yeah, I think, you know, that reminds me of so one of my favorite things about Fury Road is it's probably one of the, to me, it's one of the saddest things on film. I'm a huge cinema buff, and
I need to see it.
It's like, yeah, it's definitely really good. It's heartbreaking, yet it's very true. And it's the Glock in Fury Road. So Sasha, you mentioned decay, and material decay. So like in Fury Road, there are cars are broken, you know, all these things, everything's destroyed. And they actually do maintain their cars pretty well. Yet there's one thing in that movie that has no dust, no grime, that is perfectly maintained, and it is this Glock. And I think it's a Glock. It's not a 43. It's one of the, maybe it's a 26. It might be a little bigger than 26. Anyway, like basically that is a sobering truth. Like it hit me so hard that is absolutely likely to happen, because the polymer of that Glock it's so, it will hold up so well.
Like the gun stays clean, like the cleanest thing throughout the movie.
Yeah, because like Glocks are, and things like that are really easy to maintain, and Glocks are known for being like, you shouldn't do this if you own a gun. Yet if you don't maintain it, it'll still fire for a while, even in those conditions, like in the sand and all this stuff. And yet it's really sad to me that is what's preserved in this film. That's the most pristine, beautiful thing left, is this gun that people are taking care of. You kind of get the idea. They're handing it down. They're maintaining it.
It's like a sacred Glock.
Yeah. And there's even like in Fury Road, there's a thing called the Bullet Farm where they're actually like still making bullets. So I think like what you mentioned is so important, that we understand that the things that keep our world going like this, it's the ideology into materiality. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, I know it was bigger than the 26, but yeah, thankfully we had another gun nerd in there. Thank you, Festo. So yeah, it's like we really have to think about how did capitalist ideology, how does military ideology, how does the policing culture of America actually like enact itself in material worlds and in our material space. And like you said, how do we turn our ideology, our leftist perspective, socialist perspective, into actual like physical reality? Because that's going to be so much more important when if like things collapse to a degree where people don't have, like, books burn and they can't just pull up a documentary to watch who the Black Panthers were. Somebody's going to have to embody that in a play, in a something to like tell them and express it. So like, you know, I'll end on this, like art, culture, all of that stuff is really the thing. But
so there's art and there's culture, but I also think, and this is going to go to another post-apocalyptic thing, like After Earth, which I know is like the worst movie ever. But I think socialists will have just the renewal of life. Like a lot of the reason why capitalists will have like very obvious signals of their being here is because their whole thing is to create just capital, useless. Like it's a gun. It's a really well-made gun that lasted the test of time, but it still wasn't useful besides just being here. And so I think the socialists, and maybe specifically like eco-socialists, examples will be the continuation of the cycle, of the life cycle. After Earth, humans left, and they came back to the Earth, and the whole idea was that like there's a bunch of monsters here designed to kill humans, which is a plot hole, and it's a terrible movie. But what was interesting was that the planet survived, which brings me to the question of like apocalypse for who? Like, is the apocalypse for us necessarily a bad? The dinosaurs had an apocalypse, you know, like the mammoths had an apocalypse. Some might say that for the genus of Homo, there was an apocalypse, and now there's just Homo sapiens. So this idea of apocalypse being the end of the world kind of limits the idea of the world almost. Like even with climate change, the sentiment has been like, this is going to be bad for people and some animals, but the planet will survive.
Yeah,
the planet will be fine.
That.
Kind of a question of like, push this into another question, but I wanted to idea of this first.
It's helpful for me to think about the world as something that is like mapped onto the planet, because the Earth is here, you know, like the Earth has always been here, and like the world is kind of like something more like imaginary, like even the like orientation of our maps and stuff, like the actual land masses, like they are skewed in a way, like it's socially constructed, like what we think of as the world.
Especially with like Africa, and it's racially constructed, like Africa being way bigger than is presented on any map. And I think it's interesting to ask this because I think another form of, and we kind of mentioned it before, recession, another form of apocalypse of system breaking will be an economic system or like a robotic. And this is the last kind of apocalypse we haven't talked about, where the tech is gone, right? Like a worldwide EMP. And we still have like farms, you know, we still have all these things, but the technology and specifically a lot of our manufactured ideals lose any validity. And that's a form of apocalypse that I think is the most likely to happen if we are going to get an apocalypse. Unless Jesus is waiting on any day to pop on down and punish us. But outside of that, I think that getting rid of our fake concepts, like Sasha said, like our concept of the world, our larger concept of the world, our larger concept of value, our larger concept of even relationships, that's all based off of a technological fake artistic, will be the end of us at some point.
I do want to say about the kind of the world ending versus the planet ending. I think one thing, like, I think it is important to point out that if humans like die off, like the Earth will still be here. And I think that is some of that does come from our Western understanding of ourselves being separate from things, like humans being separate from the rest of the natural world. I think as a Western philosophy, I think that, because like it does worry me, like when you hear these like leftists, like white folks, will be like, oh yeah, once I can't wait till everything ends because humans deserve to die and we just shouldn't be here anymore. I'm like, man, that is so Western. Like, we are part of this planet. We grew out of this planet. Like, the same way gardens flower, like planets flower and birth life, then we are part of that. So I think some of that is our like disconnection from it that we have to kind of reconnect and understand like the health of the planet is our health. Yeah, because we are part of it. We're the tendrils growing up out of this thing. Yeah, I also I'm trying to pull up a map of the proportions, the actual proportions of the world. Let me see if I can find one.
Yeah, I don't think that we stated when I was recording like about the definition of apocalypse and like the etymology behind that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we usually think of it in colloquial like terms that it's like the end of the world, but like etymology I'm not even gonna try, but when we look back at like the making of the word, it's
the etymology,
revelation or like disclosure, like think like lifting up a veil. So it's like getting rid of these illusions, that as if we're like separate from the earth or something, like that's an illusion.
And so when we look at the erosions of systems, sometimes it's not even like a post-apocalyptic kind of medium showing this. I sometimes think to the movies like Lost or like Lord of the Flies, which is an easy one that I think where it's just that like you don't destroy the system, you just take a few people out of it and see what happens, where all they have left is their past understandings and on willpower to uphold. And I think naturally we will come to a peaceful standing. And when I say we, I think over generations we could get there. It's just I can't see taking the population we have now to a cooperative. I think initially it'll be cooperative, like we Sir said in Ohio and like in all the kind of rural areas. It'll be cooperative, but it won't stay that way. As soon as there's a surplus or it's not basic survival, there will be a shift. Does that make sense? There will be a grab to just kind of maintain power or maintain influence as soon as we get to that point of surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the illusion that I see falling like with the end of like capitalism and all this is that there is scarcity. Like that is an illusion. And when we're no longer operating in these systems that support reinforcing that idea, like the fact that most of us don't actually like grow our own food. We like go to a grocery store that is the owner of a lot of capital and the exploiter of a lot of like of laborers, people who go into work every day. Like that is one example of like the upkeeping of the illusion, like the fact that we think that we have to go to a separate place and that like Earth doesn't just make our food, but in reality it does. So like if we can build like the ways or remember the ways of like being a part of the Earth and like it being our support, then it doesn't even matter really what some people who might have the leftover like remnants of like feeling like things are scarce, because they'll see like evidence that it's not, and like it and like also we'll just be operating in a way where we're like we've remembered this, so that's kind of like how I see it and how like I kind of get past the maybe like, oh, do we have to think about like what people will like what power people will be trying to grab, if we actually have built a structure that's very like strong, then I feel like it's like something that might just be obsolete.
Yeah, I think it would take a lot of work. I think it takes a lot of work now to start that, because I really do think that like I think it's the natural inclination for people to cooperate, and people also cooperate to bad ends. And I think that there would be a large group of people in other, that were like, hey, we're we're just going to ride around like kind of like a Mad Max. We're going to use up all the gasoline we have. We're going to look for other communities to try to take things from. Yeah, I think the more we can do now to prepare, like you said, this material world of our ideas. I think that's something that a lot of times the left really fails at, is we tend to stay like way up here, and we need to like bring it down into practice, material, culture, art, so that, like you're saying, we build up this institutional infrastructure, and not just institutions purely, and like we do need leftist institutions, yet we build up leftist thought structure and philosophy that can actually like last like across generations. I think that is the key. And like, of course,
we're not starting from zero.
Like, yeah, we're not starting from zero. I mean, I've got, you know, evidence of multiple group, like 100-year-old Black groups. So we all do, like the red, black, and green flag we have. Like there's a reason for that. It was so effective, you know. So yeah, I think it's like we have to start to materialize a lot more of the direction we want to go.
Part of that.
Do you think that there's no, I was going to say that, like, do you think that there's because I thought about like how the right kind of materializes, and you said that, like, the left stays up here and we need to bring it down to earth. But I do think that one issue is that, like, a lot of times, first thing I thought of is like country music, at least the new country music. Like, you listen to country, and a lot of it has very right-wing ideas, but they're simple. I mean, their whole reason why they love Trump is because he's simple. And I think that at some point there was like, when left was the mainstay, when left was the status quo, pop music reflected this, right? There was like sometimes where pop left-ish ideas. And I think a problem, or maybe a benefit of the left, because I don't exactly want to let liberals in, but no matter how far right or how center right you are, you're into the right group, you're invited. As long as you're white, but like, you're invited. If you're center right and you just believe that capitalism is great, but maybe we should get rid of racism, you're still invited to the right side. If you're ultra right, KKK, you're also a part of the right. Whereas I feel like the left, you have people like us who would be considered the far left in terms of like American culture. And I don't want anything to do with a liberal. I don't want anything to do with a center left who's going to try to explain to me that, you know, we need to keep the Congo under change because of the, like, you know, just how the way things are. So you think that that might be adding to our kind of dissonance in the left, or dissonance from the material world?
Yeah. Go ahead, Sasha.
Can you ask it again? Like, what is adding to it? Like the.
Do you think that the fact that, to break it down, somebody who's far left like ourselves would not interact with the same cultural, or at least positively interact with the same cultural phenomenons as somebody who is center left, whereas that problem doesn't really exist on the right?
Yeah, I think I do think I've been thinking this for a while. It is so important in our country that we differentiate liberals from socialists. Like, and part of the issue is it's an American problem. Like in France, in the EU countries, in all these other places that have where these ideologies actually started and grew up, our democratic socialists are like their center left, because they have true leftist ideology and political movements and systems and structures in place and institutions that they've built up over like many years. Here, we kind of have this idea, we talk about liberals as being on the left, and you know, the history behind that is like where it all started, the French Revolution. It was literally like where they sat. Like, it was like one group was on the left, one group was on the right. And so there is like a broad sense of like conservatism, liberalism, left and right. We kind of have to elevate the conversation to where people were trying to get to in the 20s, 30s, like Spanish, you know, before 1800s, of like, what is socialism? what is anarchism? We're talking about deep values of human connection, because liberals, in the liberal philosophy, supports policing. And if you really, and the more we get into what liberal philosophy actually is, the primacy of the individual over other things, that's how we get, that's part of how we have gotten this like virulent capitalism, and this idea that people should get to capitalize everything, and we should, a person, if that's their dream and that's their like what they think is right, that they should own a lake and tell other people they can't go to the lake because they've just wanted this dream their whole lives. Like liberals support that because that's liberalism. Yet I think we really have to like get a little bit more serious about these definitions here, because while it's true that we're seeing the idea of that, like people are saying, oh, this is breaking down, and I think that is just a rehashing of colonialism. Everything old is new again. We come to the colony, we redo everything. It's always this new, when we have to like really like build on the shoulders of giants, as we say. Yeah, so I think that's part of it, is really like getting to what do these things mean, and like understand that like the blue dog Democrats, the corporate Democrats, the liberals, that is a policing ideology, and it always has been. Yeah, that's my thing about it.
So then what would an actual center left look like? And do you consider yourself center left? Do you have an example of somebody being center left? Because I do think my entire point was there's an alienation.
I think it's progressives. I think for us here in America, yeah, it's like progressives and it's democratic socialists, I think, are more to the center than they, like Bernie Sanders coming out and saying we need to have strong immigration, and he might not agree with how Trump's doing it. Yeah, we need to be kicking people out of the country. Like that's a center left idea. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely as far left as I think we could get. Yeah, what about you?
I think it's like not okay, let me restructure what I'm gonna say. The left and right, like you pointed out, comes from like where people were sitting on the side of whatever like state house they were debating in. Like I don't think it's like an inherent like way that we have to define ourselves along the spectrum. Like I think that this is more like I don't think it actually applies to us as Africans. Like I think it's more like we see political talk like in the like dominant media, and for the right people, like they're gonna call anything like moderate to left as leftist. So it's not like they're even like actually getting into the intricacies of like how people define themselves, whether they're like democratic socialists or like socialists or anarchists, whatever. I think that we're gonna like in the end of all of this like colonialism, we're gonna be broken out and like past like that, like where we're like defining ourselves as leftists, because also to the way that Democrats are called leftists all the time too. Like, I don't know. I feel to me it's just a lot of like, all of that is just like it can be very like confusing, and like I think it's a way to like kind of distort what's really going on. And all of these people are liberals, really, when you think about it. Like liberals are like, okay, I don't want to say also in a derogatory way or anything. Like people can have, anyone can have the tendency to like act in a liberal way, in the way that I'm viewing it, in my opinion. Like anyone can go about it, it's the act of like kind of like tussling with politics and with like resources as if it's only a mental exercise, or as if it's just like something to like kind of debate about, and like it's a state of like conversation where you're separated like from your body in a way, and in that heady space. To me, that's how I view it. It's like you're just engaging with like the conversation more than actually like embodying, like being what you're about, you know, or like just being yourself. um so like when
Yeah.
you were pointing out that like we have to bring things down, like that is something that I'm on too, like that I wanted to also like talk about. Like just a lot of these conversations I feel like get into like really circles and like redundant spaces because of anxiety and of like not knowing, where really we just have to like one, like process trauma, process a lot of like anxiety and stuff that has been like collected over like generations and like throughout lives of trauma. Process that so that we can integrate everything down and like actually create in the material.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex thing. I mean, to the liberal conservative thing, I mean, we're talking about two separate things, two separate and both correct definitions. There is what do liberal and conservative mean as like political or social poles. So like as a liberal, you know, there are socialists, there are people and there are ministers, finance ministers in China that are conservative because they believe in conservative socialist communist values. And there are some of them that are more liberal in their approach, that they believe there could be more change. So there's like, what are the philosophical meanings? And then there's what are the political movements that have come around in specific countries. Like here, our conservative movement means a certain thing that it might not mean in another state or another country. Our liberal movement means a different thing. I think I would just strongly though push. I would really advocate for us, rather than run away from the conversation, that we elevate the conversation. Because I agree with you that like people call the Democrats the left, it doesn't really mean that. I don't think that means we should not have those conversations and seek to refine them and like get back to the point of like, you know, you mentioned socialism in Africa. Like it always bugs me when I talk to like white socialists and like, you got to read these books, and there's no like buddy from Vietnam, there's nobody from Africa. Like we help to further this concept of how to collectively live together. We know that Marx and some of them took a lot of our ideas to build this idea we call socialism. So I think like rather than abandon the ideas, we have to keep them going, because this is an intellectual exercise. Like freeing our people is going to take real like intellectual work, you know. I hear you that it can get to be like it's confusing for like people in the mainstream and stuff, but I still think that we need to do it, and we need to marry that with that like actual like examples, like physical examples, starting collectives, doing things to like show what it actually looks like. Yeah, because if we don't do both, I think we're doomed to fail.
I also want to talk on two things: a idea of like left and right. Huh?
I'm deleting a comment. Yeah, folks in the comments and stuff, if you're still listening, we don't want to hear what you think about how any of us look. Keep that to yourself, not our business. Yeah. Okay, let's move on.
But what I was going to say about the left and right, and I also wanted to kind of talk about the idea of just the dichotomy of understanding. I feel like we can. I'm trying to say this. It's simple. I don't want to say that socialism as an idea is simple, or like capitalism as an idea is simple. But the idea of just wanting to collectively work together is simple. You even brought up the fact that Karl Marx stole a lot of ideas from Africans to come up with his idea of socialism. It just wasn't socialism. It's just the way things were. It was logical at that point. And I think that's where we kind of lose it. that it was logical to say, I have a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to use all this stuff. Anybody who needs it can have it. The idea of like, I'm a farmer, I grow tomatoes for the community, and so I'll have enough tomatoes for myself, but I also know when I go to the market, I can get anything that I need due to my labor of producing these tomatoes, and same for the leather worker, and same for all these other people. So there just wasn't something so simple, didn't really need a strong definition or way of being until there was a more complex, predatory, illogical way of being. And when you had an illogical way of being, such as capitalism, now you need a word and a complex understanding of something that was just a basic human nature. Like we don't have, it's walking. We don't have to have I'm not calling it mechanical blood movement through biochem movement. You're walking. And so it's just like you feed people and you work with people just because that's what you do. And it's until you, I think the complex wording of like, oh, it's socialism, it's communism, it's basic human sense, it's basic common sense when you remove the millions of the years and years and millions of hours of warping your natural being. It will just be the natural way of your thinking and being.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I do think, there were complex systems of cooperation and bureaucracy in West African spaces too, though. And they had long philosophies and definitions of things and beliefs in there, So I think people will always want to institutionalize something so that we can pass it on to our children. And we'll always want to make sure that we refine our ideas and things like that. Yeah, I do. I agree with you all. Like that the reason where we have socialism and communism as we have it now is a reaction. It's a total reaction to what basically what capitalism is built up. And I think there's an opportunity, like if all of this like ended and collapsed, like for sure, to like kind of grow that like common sense.
And make sure to try to grow it without poison, without movement through it. I think we've hit most of our questions and our goals for this one. And we are
final thoughts, ideas, questions, anything.
I would say my final thought is that, or final question, will we need, and this can kind of bleed over to like our revolutionary episode, if that's what's coming next. But do you need there to be some kind of apocalyptic or major cataclysmic event in order for a new world order to come into place? Or can a new world order grow and succeed a previous old world order without such a huge shift? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense to me. I think that I believe that it can just, take place, and it doesn't have to be something necessarily that people, that are written in the same history books that we know are like filled with like, myths and stuff. It can just be something that takes place and just happens like today, literally, we can do those steps, those little things that like collect up to the revolution we're like intending to build.
So you think it can come from, as we're in the broken system, we can kind of build a new system within it?
Yes. Yeah. By like shifting our investment of energy.
What do you think, sir?
I think I think it could work. And I think that like, especially the way technology works now, I think we have a better chance of a not catastrophic shift towards like an actual like socialist system. We have more of a chance of doing that without warfare than we did before, even though it might seem completely like the opposite. Because I think one of the things, like for example, one thing that's happening now, China is putting up so much solar power infrastructure that they're gonna end up basically like in 20 years or so, it's gonna be cheaper worldwide to use solar energy than gas. And that's what they're doing as a superpower. Like, instead of investing in this like military, they're investing in flooding the world and the world's power grid with solar energy. And what that's going to do, it'll make it to where in 10, 15 years, it won't be really profitable to keep extracting gas. Even if like the US cuts itself off, which we are doing right now, from all of that, we would just end up basically being like a place people go to see how combustion engines still work in 10 years if things keep up in our country the way they are. It's not like the rest of the world will just leave us behind. And yet that kind of thing, it's going to show people worldwide like, oh wow, we should just invest in solar energy. We should buy these cheap solar power units from China instead of working with the US. I think that there are opportunities like that, kind of like you were saying, Sasha, where if we as people, as humans, start to move really like deliberately with like energy and investment into those other spaces, there is time to basically like kind of short circuit capitalism. I think that they're going to fight. I think that that is absolutely the reality. I just also think that I think part of what's happening to the US right now is the US understanding it can't fight the rest of the world, and that it just needs to like focus on itself for a little bit, and trying to control brutally the citizens within it. So I think, like, long story short, I think it is possible. I think it would take a lot of work and a lot of like basically heart and behavior shifts in a lot of people to do it. Yet I think it's possible. I don't know. It's hard to do that from the West. Like, we in America are conditioned to expect a lot of things in life that other people don't have. But that's the whole thing. So yeah, I think it's possible. It would just take a lot of discipline and energy.
I also heard a lot of discipline, energy, and kind of the assistance of another state, like the rest of the world, kind of forcing America or the Western world to shift, which is what I've always thought it would be. I always thought that the end of this capitalistic regime would go the way of feudalism rather than just returning to feudalism, but it seems like we're returning to just some kings and queens. It seems like we're going backwards. But when I still had hope, there was an idea that like eventually there would be something that was just too good to pass up for the common man, something that would be as attractive to people today as capitalism and merchants were to people of Europeans of the Dark Ages, and afterwards, their conquests for said things. But I agree that it's possible. I do think some cataclysmic. I don't know why I keep trying to use big words, but I do think some big event will shift it. Will get us to the point where we have to build a new world order, simply because the old world order will just fail at the very few things that it's still working towards. Like, we have cars. And I think that once cars stop working, and once the shiny bag really becomes obviously a shiny bag, in fact, fashion just doesn't really do anything for you anymore, people will say, okay, anything's better than this. So I think what we're going to get to is the anything's better than this kind of mindset. And that's when people are really going to give socialism or full-blown fascism a try, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, and the tendency of this space is the latter. So yeah, in the chat, doesn't the U.S. intend to take the rest of the world down with it? I wonder right now. I think that what's happening right now at the top of the U.S., I don't think we have one. So I think we have competing factions. I think that we've got literally, specific people. There's like Trump and the Trumpists, and that kind of like group of financiers who are just trying to like basically capitalize on this moment. Like, let's try to get rich, flee to Argentina, sell the country, sell all of the, you know, homes all to other countries, whatnot, to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. You got those people, and then you got the other parts of the coalition, like Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, who are like really actual, like they want minority rule here. They want probably to attack the rest of the world. You've got some within that space, probably some of the Christian groups. So I think like there's a push and pull right now of like what the U.S. is actually trying to do, whether we are just turning protectionist or if we're going to go back to like conquest.
I think the second level of that
I think we're trying to control the South America right now. Yeah, that's also our block over here. I think yeah, it's a good question. I think the U.S. is still dangerous, and I think that in this kind of like imagining, I hear like Sashi mentioned that we want to work just as hard as on building as we do on preparing to defend, and I think that's part of the reality too. Like we would have to figure out what to do with all these folks who are still throwing around bombs.
I agree with that, but I also think that America will have a choice to make. And if it has to rely purely on its military might to maintain its standing as number one, eventually there will be more organized efforts against it. And even while America is a global superpower now, a lot of that comes from its like relationships. And if those relationships are completely cut off due to it just finally snapping and acting in a completely totalitarian way, I think it will either fall by the hands of more advanced countries, or more likely it'll just shift, and it'll shift the the story. It'll just say, oh, we're back to being peacekeepers, like they're peacekeepers all across the world, and that's why they have military bases everywhere. They'll go to like, oh, we're going to take on. They will be forced to, and then they'll try to become the top of the industry once they're forced to capitulate to the industry. I think that might be why we're shifting from a world where there were oil tycoons to we're now techno tycoons. Before it was I don't know any big oil names. I'm sure you can help me out with this. But when those were right, before it was that, now it's Zuckerberg, it's Musk, it's the OpenAI CEO Leonard something for Oracle. It's a new techno world, which will be the top kind of. So it's really less about where the U.S. will go, and really where will these titans of industry go. Will OpenAI be able to keep up with not Surfshark, DeepShark, which is the AI company in China, which is the competitor? Will it be able to keep up? Will China overtake? Once China does overtake, what would the conversation look like? I'm sure there will be some conversations behind doors that we won't be privy to, that the United States will use to stay on top of the world. But I don't think it's going to tear it down. I think it's going to have to rise to the occasion.
Sasha, you want to jump in on that, or?
My thoughts on this, I don't know. Yeah, I think that I'm more just like trying to like get past so all of this like activity, like war and stuff, like even like the AI, like the big like data centers that are being built, like all of this it makes an impression on the earth. Like at a certain point, like we have to remember that there is another way. Like it's not just we're presented like an argument and that we have to go and like be the victor in it. Some arguments and like some premises are just like there's a difference between like righteousness and and justice, like, is kind of like the way that I'm thinking. And like people can present any argument that they want, you know, like the way that colonial invaders have and continue to like impose on the earth. And trying to fight that always can be exhausting. And at a certain point, like, we have to remember that there's another way. It's not just to like take down whoever is coming to compete with you, because then you're just using all your energy to like fight an enemy rather than like just live your life and be your actual full self. So that's kind of just like how I feel, like, is about
this specific topic of the United States. Well, I think this circles back to, will it be the people or will it be another institution? Will we be lemmings to just follow whatever institution, state, corporation will be leading the charge, or will we have a people-led complete reset? Yeah. And to like kind of cap it all off back to post-apocalyptic, I think a big part of that is maybe something taking care of that system for us. Like the appeal, at least for me in a post-apocalyptic world, is I don't have to fight the system that's had thousands of years to establish itself. It'll be taken out by its own hubris. And then all I have to do is convince the people what's best for them without a looming propagandized system. Most of the power comes from propaganda. So without the TV channels and the Wall Street and the journals in order to push their ideas, when all that goes away in a post-apocalyptic world, we can't do, like Sasha said, focus on an internal and community-based way of being where you can grow and really understand how to live in a world that doesn't require you to be starving or be under threat of starvation or homelessness or any kind of extreme status to make you want to work or live or even exist.
Yeah. And so I guess to end on preservation, so, what are you all taking or trying to preserve in the apocalypse? What's the thing you're trying to bring from the old world?
That's a good question. What would I bring from the old world? I don't necessarily think the idea of assigning value, like stark value to things, is a bad idea. A lot of this is like the one capitalistic thing I hold on to. But I think just for ease of like understanding how a system works, you can have something be like, oh, this apple is worth 3 something. I think the idea of currency necessarily isn't bad. It's just it should be used as just a valuating system rather than just something to hoard. I don't think you should get currency just because of currency's shape. You shouldn't be able to get a large amount of currency through manipulating the inner workings of currency. I think it should be simple and it should stay simple, but I would keep the concept of currency.
The first thing that comes to my mind, like, I think that we can still preserve the spirit of like entrepreneurialism. I know that this might sound like contradictory, but the way that I think of like this, like the way that people are compelled to like go at their stuff, like I'm really into like doing our own work and not having to like I know maybe I shouldn't even use that word. Like, I don't know. I'm like kind of trying to read the chat. But the way that I think of like entrepreneurialism is like people trying to go do their own work and like not work for somebody. Because like I think that the idea of like going to get a job and like all of this stuff, this is just something that I'm really like interested in breaking down, but like preserving the like spirit of people, like, finding their strength and like fully like self-actualizing and like being that and contributing it to society and like to a communally like organized society.
So the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean, because I think that there's a problem here in the U.S. where we are like, the U.S. and capitalism has like totally captured that idea that people have initiative. Like there's this idea that that's why capitalism works, because people want to succeed, people want to try and compete, quote unquote. What people really want to do is create and share, and like you said, self-actualize, which is like one of my favorite terms. Like we gotta really get into that one of these days, because like that's what the problem is here in America. That says basically like the racism keeps us as Black people from self-actualizing, and that's like one of its major intents and major focuses, is to keep us from actualizing as people. So yeah, I think that having that kind of like spirit of like, in the Black community we call it like, hey, like, you know, you a little bit of a kind of go get it spirit, like little get up and go, and like to have this energy to like help each other, to work for with one another. Like you know, I still volunteer doing, I haven't worked at a factory. I used to work at a warehouse, and I haven't done that kind of work for years, and yet I still go and volunteer doing that kind of work in the community, because I like to do it. I like to, you know, I'm like, hey, I used to work at a warehouse. I know about infrastructure. I know how to move this stuff around. I know how to move pallets and all these things. So like,
you're giving free work to factory owners?
Well, yeah, because people, you got to work. That's part of life. That's the richness of life. And I think that is what people like. I was raised like in a totally different, very Africa socialist space. So I think I totally hear what you're saying, that is not like, that isn't tied to capitalism. The idea that people want to work with one another. It's just something we have to like reconceptualize, reintroduce. I think the thing I would take, it's the books. I mean, you know, I've got a Black book collection that I'm really proud of, like Black history collection and all that stuff. Like that to me, like, you know, that's where I would probably be like really sentimental, like Fahrenheit 451. I'd be trying to get people to like, you know, memorize them and doing stuff like that. I think that is like what is really, really, really important.
So we have our three. We got books. So in our post-apocalyptic socialist perfect world, we got entrepreneurial spirit, concept of currency, and our historical literature is our perfect world, which kind of sounds like capitalism, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But but that's our socialistic world.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about what our next episode might be. I think we don't entirely know yet. We've got a couple ideas. About doing a revolution episode, revolution stories, our idea of it. Yeah, we've got a few other things in the tank. We will.
Yeah, Diallo in the chat. When you were saying that you were working or volunteering at a factory, I'm like, I'm out of the free.
Oh no, it's not a factory. It's a Black-led food initiative that we're
okay.
Here in Akron, and eventually, like, we want to turn it into like a community, a collective, like food distribution, like storage, like actual like shop. We'll see if we can do it. Yeah, you know, that's the thing. Like, you know, you always get that question as a leftist. So, what kind of work you do? You know, what you really? I don't even answer anymore. I'm just like, I rarely even volunteer that kind of thing. Yet it came up in conversation.
But also, it's like, as long as it's a thing, I always hate this idea that purity is like, you're a socialist, so you shouldn't be working at all. I'm like, yeah, but like, you know, food and like housing, so you have to work, and it's not always going to be like, I eventually am. My end goal is to become like a teacher, because I think that's the most, for me, that's the most like socialistic, teaching people. I can tell a bunch of teenagers to become socialists before they get stuck in capitalistic mindset. Great. But I also will take that raise. So I think this like purity culture of like, what it means to be a socialist and what it means to not is kind of just a way of creating an unreal standard. Like, unless you're Jesus, then you might as well just be evil and Satan. It's a weird purity thing. But we should definitely close out because
let's say good night.
All right, folks, thank you for listening. That was our episode 4 of the Cosmic Cowrie Shellcast, Post-Apocalyptica. And as usual, like, share, subscribe, go to AfricanWorldOrder.com, get some t-shirts. And thanks for listening. Thank you, everybody who commented in the chat. Eventually, we'll probably open up to try to invite guests on and talk and stuff.
We're trying to make them more concise and make the original talk maybe like an hour long, and then leave the last 15 to 20 minutes for anybody who wants to ask questions, things of that nature. We're also going to go bring back our final review. So at the end, the first hour or the first half hour to 45 minutes will be our talking about the concept. The 15 minutes after will be reviewing a specific movie or representative of said topic, and then we'll open up the floor towards the end. And so we're happy for the engagement. We really hope that there can be more engagement and more questions, because that's going to be a big part of future episodes.
Yes, thank you. Thank y'all.
All right, African World, take care.
Take care.
Good night.